right, there's our bell. We are in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Mostly finished with it. Anybody need a workbook? 2 Corinthians chapter 8, we're on page 58. Y'all need one? You got it. Okay. All right, I have marked here that we got down to question number 10 in the workbook of this, on this study of chapter 8. If you remember what we've been talking about, Paul was talking to the Corinthian church about the needs that were going on in really the church around that area. And there was a famine in the land. The Corinthian church was it really in a pretty affluent area. Most of the people there probably weren't struggling too bad, even with the famine. They would have had the money, the resources to pretty well take care of themselves. But that was not the case around that area. We read about how Macedonia, while they were probably a church that suffered quite a bit more, had a lot less resources, they're actually a bigger city, but a poorer city than Corinth, and they would have actually been struggling pretty heavily with this famine. They would have been, they actually would have been hungry and actually would have had concerns about, am I going to be able to feed my family? And so they had those, but Paul was bragging on them, the Macedonians, to the Corinthians. And he was saying, look, these Macedonians, they are given things they don't even have. They are giving above their means. A lot of times when we think about giving, we think, well, once I take care of myself, then anything I have left, then that's what I can use to help others. But that was not the Macedonians' attitude. They were dedicating themselves first to the Lord, and then it was almost to the point where you can almost picture Paul saying, like, are you guys sure you want to keep giving like this? We're not told that, but you can almost see how that could be a question that Paul would ask there in the midst of this. Now, compare that to the Corinthians. He's telling the Corinthians this because they are potentially, now we don't know that everyone there, but potentially living in luxury, right? They have what they need. They probably don't know what it's like to be hungry at this point, at least the Corinth by and large. And so he's kind of using that. Again, he doesn't say, look, I'm going to make you give, even though as an apostle, right, he probably had that authority there. But we're going to get into more in chapter 9, if we get to very deep into it today, about probably why he doesn't make them. And the reason that he doesn't command it. And really the attitude that everyone should have when it comes to any kind of giving. And so let's go ahead. We'll pick up, to kind of refresh us. Now again, I'm reading from the King James because that's what our book is in. Some of the other translations, especially in these chapters, do kind of help to put some of the words at times that are a little harder for us to maybe grasp because we don't use them a whole lot into something easier. But I'm going to be using the King James. I'm going to go back and read verses 4 through 11 to refresh us, answer a couple of questions, and then I'll probably ask for a reader here. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 4, starting in 4, it says, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord, and unto us by the will of God, insomuch that we desired Titus, that he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace also. Therefore is ye abound in everything, in faith, in utterance, in knowledge, and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also. I speak not by commandment, but by the occasion of the forwardness of others, and to prove the sincerity of your love. For ye know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that he might through his poverty be rich. As wherein I give my advice for this expedient for you, who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago. Verse 11, now therefore perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have. All right, that's verses 4 through 11. So, again, some of the wording here gets kind of, at least when I speak it, makes me get a little tongue-tied. But let's go ahead and answer question 10 before we move on. Question 10 in the book on page 58 says, what rich person mentioned by Paul became poor that he might make others rich? Christ, absolutely. Jesus Christ became poor so that he might make others rich. And again, he is trying to appeal to them to say, look, y'all are wealthy, right? Y'all could be helping here, but think about Christ. Think of the riches Christ had. Christ had it all, right? Christ is in heaven with the Father, and he became poor. I mean, that's the biggest drop in history of man, right? In history of anything, to go from, well, the Son of God in heaven to a man just born to a carpenter, right? And so he's saying, look, don't be afraid of what you're going to lose, right? Don't be afraid of what you're going to give here. Don't be afraid of, oh no, it might make me poor. Look at what Jesus did. And so that's how he's trying to appeal to these Corinthians here, is to say, first of all, look at the Macedonians. Look at this example that you can see. I mean, they're not that far away. Next time I'll probably put it up on a map so y'all can see. But think of those Macedonians and the little they had, and of that little they had, how much they gave. And then think of how much Christ had, and of how much he had, look at how much he gave, right? He gave it all. And he did that for us. All right, question number 11, I believe we can answer with what we just read. If first there is what of will? Readiness. What's readiness of will? Yeah, hey, readiness of will. Like, I want to do this, right? That's what a readiness. When you think of readiness, that's, hey, as soon as the opportunity comes, I'm going to jump at it, right? That would be the readiness of will. It's not, hey, you make sure that you're ready or else. This is by their own will, right? The readiness of will, because you want to be ready to help when you can, is what that's saying here. All right, if first there is a readiness of will, there may be what? Also out of that which we have. What's that? Completion. And I like that word better. King James says performance, but when we think of giving, we should never, our minds should not go to the modern day word for performance, right? That's actually taught against, right? Making sure everybody sees you giving, right? Oh, look how great I am. Look at what I'm doing here, right? It's not a performance that way. It's the completion, right? If you're ready and you have that will and you want to do it, then you're going to make it happen. If you want to, you're going to. That's the completion. You're going to make sure that it is done there. All right. The last bit of reading here really is the last chapter for these last few questions. Verses, let's see, 2 Corinthians 8, verses 12 through 24. I know that's a little bit of a lengthy scripture there. Is anybody ready and willing? All right, Jeremy is to read that. thanks, Jeremy. It did better than I do in the morning, so there you go. All right, so we'll go back to the first part he read in a minute. But here towards the end, we see, again, this is common in these letters, but Paul is saying, hey, when Titus comes, he's good, right? Trust Titus. We're working together in this. We're both trying to accomplish these goals for the kingdom of God, right? We're both trying to help these churches. When he comes with his group, trust him and his group. They're my fellow workers with the Lord. All right, so all the way back to 12, we're back to this willing mind idea, right? For if there first be a willing mind, right? If there is a willing mind, it is accepted according to that a man hath, and not according to what he has not, right? If you really want to be a part of something, right? It's not going to be about what you don't have. It's going to be about what you don't have or what you're going to lose. It's going to be what you can use there, right? You can pull this completely out of giving, like they're doing as well, and really apply it to anything, right? If you really want to read the Bible in a year, I mean, if that's really your goal, right? If that is what you have set your mind to, you're not going to say, well, I would read the Bible in a year, but I got to watch Law and Order at this time. I got to watch Survivor at this time. I got to do this here, and then I don't have time to read the Bible every day. My schedule is booked, right? But if you really have a mind that says, I am going to read the Bible, are those other things going to get in the way? No. If that's what you set your mind to, you're going to make sure you do it, right? You're not going to think about the time you don't have. You're going to say, here's what I can do, right? Here's what I can do to make sure I accomplish that goal. And you can really apply that to anything, even outside the church, right? If you really want to get good at playing a guitar, right? You're not going to say, well, I just don't have time, because you're going to set your mind to that. And it's going to take precedence over other things. Oh, I just don't have time to go to the gym. Do you? Well, depends on how you prioritize things, right? I don't have time to pray. Do you really not? Or might you have to set a little earlier alarm, right? Or rearrange some things in your day. I don't have time to study my Bible. I don't have time to whatever it is, right? If there's a willing mind, then you can do it, right? And so that's what he's saying, along with, hey, there's a need here. These people are starving. There's a famine in the land. The Macedonians and these that are helping, they're not focused on them not having it themselves. They're saying, hey, I know I can help here, right? And so they're prioritizing that. All right, let's answer some of these questions. Number 12, supplying one another's wants would afford an equality, right? That is from verse 14. But by an equality, that now at this time your abundance may supply for their want, right? All right, let's move on. Question number 13. Paul talked about a brother whose praise was in the blank and who was sent with Titus on an errand. Gospel. Okay, so whose praise was in the gospel. What would that mean? His praise. What's praise? Worship, okay, yeah, maybe. His worship in the gospel What else? If you give someone praise, what are you giving them? Compliment. You're lifting them up, right? Hey, you're lifting this guy. His praise is in the gospel, right? That's what's lifted up here. It's the gospel, right? And so again, he's trying to make sure that they understand, hey, Titus, his companions, these are good, solid Christians that we can trust, that we need to work with, right? So this brother whose praise is in the gospel and who was sent with Titus on an errand. Hey, this guy, he's doing things for the right reasons, right? He is doing things according to God's word through the gospel. All right. Number 14. The Christian must provide for honest things in the sight of who? There's 2 blanks here. The Lord and men. Providing for honest things not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. All right, number 15. Paul called Titus a what? What 2 things did he call him? Partner and fellow worker, right? Again, it's that idea that we're on the same page. We're working towards the same goal. We're trying to help the same saints here, these followers of Christ. We're working together for this. All right, in order to try to get to chapter 9, let's go ahead and run through these true false. Again, chapter 9 is just going to get us deeper into what's already been discussed in 8. Question number 1. It is quite possible to be rich in one respect and poor in another. Absolutely, right? True. Yeah, you can be rich in money. You can have all the money that you could ever possibly dream of having, and you can be the poorest person in the world when it comes to love, right? You can be the poorest person in the world when it comes to spiritual things, right? Or flip that around, right? You can be wealthy in love. You can have an abundance of love. You can have an abundance of knowledge. You can have an abundance of grace. You can have an abundance of hope. You can have all these spiritual things. You can be abundant in those things that make up the fruit of the Spirit, right? And you can be broke. Not a dollar to your name, right? I'd say you're quite a bit richer than the one that has a wealth of money, right? You have something that's going to last. You have something that's going to go on through eternity, not something that one day somebody else is going to enjoy, right? All right, number 2. Paul had to ask continually to get any money from the churches of Macedonia. False. They were willing and they were ready, right? Almost, you get the sense he almost might have had to say, "Hey, make sure y'all are okay too," right? And in fact, we see that he encourages the Corinthians to give to the Macedonians too. All right, question number 3. If people would first give themselves to the Lord, it would not be hard for them to give liberally of their money. True, right? Again, if your focus is on God, then when there's a need that God would want fulfilled, it shouldn't be hard to fulfill that, right? All right, question number 4. In this chapter, Paul mentions both Timothy and Titus by name and praised them for their work. False. He does mention Titus, and a lot of people assume when he's talking about this group that's with him, or this brother, or these others, that, oh yeah, well Timothy's definitely in there, but we're not told that. And so the author of the lesson book was kind of trying to throw us for a loop there. All right, question number 5. In this chapter, Paul praised some brothers' good works, but didn't mention his name. True, yeah. 18 and 19. Now, why why does he mention Titus but not mention this other guy? Why do you think? Do what? Maybe they just knew, right? Maybe there was no need to mention the name because, oh well, obviously it's that guy, right? He's got that reputation. We know that that would be him. Why else might that be? I mean, we don't know, but maybe he asked Paul not to. Maybe he said, "Please, just don't say it's me, right? I'll be there, but I don't want to be out in your letters, right?" Maybe that was it. We don't know. Just interesting there that Titus mentioned by name, this other not, but again, not really important. Just a thing we can kind of just think about. All right, we are going to skip the review things that we find here on pages 59 through 61, and then we'll pick up. We're going to look at chapter 9 now. And again, chapter 9, if talking about giving made you uncomfortable in 8, hold on, because we're getting right back into it here in chapter 9. So let's go ahead. Let's see if I can read my notes here. I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. For as touching the ministering to the saints, it is, I should add, somebody else read this one. Anybody know that word? Superfluous. All right, there you have it. As touching the ministering to the saints, it is superfluous for me to write to you. For I know the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you to them of Macedonia, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal hath provoked very many. Yet I have sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain on this behalf, that as I said, ye may be ready, lest haply, if they of Macedonia come with me, and find you unprepared, we, that we say not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren, that they would go before unto you, and make up beforehand your bounty. Wherefore ye had noticed before that the same might be ready as a matter of bounty, and not as covetousness. But this I say, which soweth sparingly, he that soweth sparingly shall also reap sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall also reap bountifully. All right, let's pause and look at some of the questions here. Again, now here we're talking about there's going to be this continued collection for Christians in Jerusalem. Okay? Now, I know it's been years and years since Pentecost here. But do you remember what happened around Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost? What happened in Acts 2? All right, Pentecost, that was the first gospel sermon, right? Ever preached by Peter. Did people reject him or did they accept him? The message on Pentecost. They accepted it, yeah. Oh, not just, and an acceptance like we have, I mean, you can almost not imagine. Thousands of people hearing this message obey, right? They repent of their sins and they're baptized and they're added to the church. Thousands, right? Now it's hard for us to imagine that, but see, the reason there was so many people there, they had traveled, they had left their homes to go to Jerusalem. And so there was a lot of people that were from out of town, right? In Jerusalem. Really, in Jerusalem exploded. So a lot of people would have right then gone and taken that gospel back to their homes, right? But we read a lot of them they just stayed right there, right? The church just grew immensely there in Jerusalem. It's very likely some people said, this is more important than my home. This is more important than my business. I traveled here with my family. I'm staying with the church here, right? Anyways, it is likely there is a big influx of Christians in Jerusalem during the first century, right? On top of that, remember, there's a famine. And Jerusalem's going to be a fairly large city as well. So there is some suffering in Jerusalem. There's some need, strong need in Jerusalem. So again, this collection coming for Christians in Jerusalem. Let's go ahead and answer some questions. Might bring about some conversation here. What effect did the zeal of the brethren of Achaia have on others? Stirred them up, all right, or provoked them. Usually those words are words that have a negative connotation, aren't they? If you provoke someone or stir them up, usually that's not something good that's happening. But in this instance, it is good, right? For I know the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you, to them in Macedonia and Achaia was ready a year ago. Your zeal has provoked many, because they saw how great this group was doing. It made other people have strength, right? It made other people look and say, boy, we can do that too. Oh, we can act like that too. We can be a part of that too. We can help with that too. It stirred them up. So this is one thing that, right there, it's a good lesson for us. Sometimes it can be discouraging. We might think, well, I'm just not gonna go to church on Wednesday night because not very many people go. So I'm just gonna skip it because not very many people attend on Wednesday nights anyways. It's a smaller crowd, so it's not really that important. Or we can have the attitude of, I'm going to be there to encourage those that are there. I'm gonna stir them up. Even if it's just me and one other family, guess what? I'm going. And then others might hear that, and they might get stirred up, right? And this goes along with many things. You might see a evangelistic effort that other area churches are a part of. And you see, wow, look at what's going on there because they're a part of this. And maybe we're not doing very many evangelistic efforts. And so we think, well, we can do that. Well, let's get on board with that too. We can be a part of this, and it can stir us up, right? So the temptation sometimes is to say, well, I don't really want to, be a part of that effort. I don't really want to do that because not very many people do. When in turn, your enthusiasm in it could make it a big effort, right? It provoked many. All right, question number 2. Why had Paul sent the brethren? So they'd be ready. Yep, he says that you may be ready there in verse 3. He also says, before that, I have sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain on this behalf. Yet the main reason is so that they're ready. But he's also been bragging on them, right? He's been talking them up. He's been saying, boy, he's been going around to these different churches. He's been sending letters. He's been saying, boy, these people, they just abound in these things. And I can't wait for you to see it. And you'll see the effort that they put forward with this. He didn't want it to come to that point and then there be nothing, right? So he sends the brethren ahead and say, I've been really talking good about these. Can you make sure they're still on the right track? Can you go ahead, make sure they're ready for this? Make sure they're not waiting till the last minute. Make sure they haven't forgotten this. Make sure that my boasting isn't in vain. Because not only is that going to be discouraging to me, that's going to be discouraging to these brethren that I've told these people are going to do, right? Question number 3. What does in this behalf refer in verse 3? verse 3 says, "Yet have I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this behalf, that you may be ready." What's he referring to in this behalf? In this respect, okay? What would he be referring to there? In this matter would be another way of saying it, right? Again, he's talking about this effort, this collection for the Christians in Jerusalem, right? In this behalf, in this effort, in this respect. Look, I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be vain about this effort, right? About this helping of the church in Jerusalem is what you could almost put there. All right, question number 4. What could cause Paul to be ashamed of his boasting about the Corinthians? We kind of just answered that, but why would he be ashamed of his boasting? They're not be prepared, right? This would be like, some of y'all have maybe experience being ashamed of some boasting, right? You may talk to, I don't know, maybe you talk to your kid's teacher and you say, boy, they are reading, they can read a book. They are so good at all of this. We've been reading all summer. I can't wait for you to see it when they get into your class. And then that teacher's like, they didn't know what the alphabet was, right? Oh boy, that boasting. I'm ashamed of that, right? Oh, we gotta review because we were reading great this summer, right? That's, hey, I don't want to have been saying something and then it come to fruition and that not be the case, right? That would be what he would be ashamed there. All right. What is the principle about sowing and reaping found in the chapter? Verse 6 is where we're looking there. If you sow sparingly, you're going to reap sparingly. If you sow bountifully, you're going to reap bountifully. What is sowing in this context? Spread the gospel. Okay. Was that the second bell or first? First. Okay. When we hear the word sowing, we think of maybe a sewing machine or a needle, right? When they think of sowing, what is it? Planting. Yeah, planting seeds, right? Let's say you till up a 50 by 200 garden. You are, boy, I'm going to have a big garden this year. It's going to be great. I've got this huge plot ready. And you buy one pack of seeds. How much is that garden going to produce? One little pack, one of the little Walmart packs. Probably a lot of weeds, right? You're not going to get a whole lot of veggies, are you? Mine will probably produce a lot of weeds anyways, right? But you're not going to get a whole lot of veggies. I mean, if you sow sparingly, if you say, I've got this huge garden and I'm going to plant 10 seeds, it's going to be great. Bellies are going to be full. Guess what? For one, depending on the plant, that might not even be enough to help them pollinate each other, right? But you're going to sow sparingly. If you plant 10 seeds, you're probably not getting 10 plants, right? But if you go, I'm going to plant, I'm going to look it up, I'm going to space these out in every row in this huge garden. I'm going to plant just the right amount. I'm going to fertilize it. I'm going to make sure this thing is prepared. I'm going to water. I'm going to sow bountifully. You're probably going to have a bountiful harvest, right? You're probably going to get a lot from that garden. But you'll never get a lot from that garden if you sow just a little. So, sow sparingly. If you sow sparingly, if you just put a little bit into your Christianity, you really shouldn't expect much out of it. You really shouldn't expect much of a reward. You may not get anything, right? Hey, I obeyed the gospel, right? There you go. I obeyed the gospel, and this is the date I did it. And you sow that seed, right? Good chance if that's where it stops, and you stop tending to that, and you don't continue to sow seeds of obedience, it's a good chance that's producing nothing, right? There's no harvest there. But if you say, all right, what can I do for the Lord? What are all the things that I can do for the Lord? How can daily I dedicate something to the Lord? How can daily I make sure my focus is the Lord, and I try to grow in the Lord, and I try to spread the gospel, to Jeff's point, to the Lord. I evangelize, right? I go out, and what's your reward if you're honestly, truly obeying bountifully? It's more likely to be a bountiful reward, right? Sow sparingly, you're going to reap sparingly. You're going to starve, right? Sow bountifully, you're going to be able to reap bountifully. There will be blessings. Now, again, he's using this in the context of how much they help the church here in Jerusalem. Now, that doesn't mean that if you help the church, that in this life, you're going, it is going to just pay off exponentially. A lot of people think that. A lot of people think, and that's the whole idea of karma, right? That if I do the right things in this life, hey, just wait. They're going to pay off in this life. You'll see. They're going to pay off. We're never guaranteed that they're going to pay off in this life. But we do know that when the harvest comes, right? When this life is over, when we stand in judgment before God, we'll be able to reap bountifully if we have sowed bountifully, right? If we have given of our time, if we have given of our money, if we have given of our resources, if we have dedicated ourselves to the Lord first, before anything else, he takes priority, there'll be a bountiful harvest. And so such a powerful lesson there in verse 6. All right, we'll go ahead. I think it's just about time, so we'll go ahead and pause. There we go, perfect. And pick up on question 6 next week.